Dr. Abraham, okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Abrams. Okay. All right. Jay, it's Al Teresa. Both the petitioner and the respondent are going to need to be able to screen share today. Is that going to be an issue?
This is Kevin. It's not going to be an issue. So who is that?
The respondent and the petitioner. Okay, the petitioner, the district is not going to need to screen share, just the respondent.
Okay, do you have the name so I can so I know so I can allow them to share?
I'm sorry, say again?
Do you have the name of the responder?
Wendy Wayne.
Okay.
Do you have that?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to put us on mute for just a few more minutes, okay?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, but let's go ahead and start the recording and call to order the South Coast Air Quality Management District Hearing Board. Today is Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. And we have before us today one item, and that is the South Coast AQMD versus Western Municipal Water District, case number 6240-1, and this is for an order of abatement. And who is here on behalf of the executive officer?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Catherine Roberts on behalf of the executive officer.
Thank you. And on behalf of Western Municipal Water?
Good morning, Your Honor. This is Wendy Wang, counsel for Western Municipal Water. And to my left is Anthony Budichin, apologies, who's a compliance officer at Western. And to his left is Chris Fight, operational manager for Western. I think I just butchered his title.
We'll clear it up with the first.
Okay, yes,
Thank
we're going to
you.
need you to spell the name for the clerk and give your title to the clerk.
So we'll start with me. My first name is Anthony. And then last name is Budichin, Budicin.
Okay, and your title?
Environmental and Regulatory Compliance Manager.
And you, sir?
Chris, Chris, Fike, Fike. I am the Deputy Director of Maintenance Operations.
Okay. And will you be having these gentlemen as your witnesses this morning?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And Ms. Roberts, are you going to have any witnesses?
Yes, the district will have one witness, Brian Cho, who's a program
Okay.
supervisor.
Thank you. And do we have members of the public that are online? Mal Teresa?
It does not appear that there are any members. It looks like there's a district witness, but I believe that they're just for observation at
Just
this point.
listening. Okay, great. All right, so all those who are going to be providing testimony this morning, if you can please stand and raise your right hand. Excuse me. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will be telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Okay, so with that, we have one exhibit to be marked, and that is the proposed findings and conditions. And that will be marked as number 1. And then we also have the presentation, and that'll be marked as A, as an apple. And with that, Ms. Roberts, did you want to start with your opening?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the hearing board. The matter today is a stipulated order for abatement under District Rule 1196. This is one of the district's heavy-duty fleet rules that the board is fairly familiar with. This rule applies to fleets of public entities where they have 15 or more vehicles in their heavy-duty fleet, and it requires them to essentially avoid purchase of diesel wherever possible. The fleet today, Western Municipal Water District, has a total of 8 non-compliant vehicles, and the proposed schedule that the district has worked diligently on to get stipulated with the respondent addresses these vehicles in a reasonable and path to get them back to compliance. Specifically, 6 of these vehicles are scheduled to be replaced with zero-emission vehicles. That is one of the first times we have ever come to an order where every single one of the replaced vehicles is to be a zero-emission vehicle. In the heavy-duty space especially, that is a difficult lift even today. Even as we further technology advancement, that advancement in the heavy-duty space is not as advanced as in the passenger vehicle space, for example. And so, as you'll see in our proposed conditions, the parties have tried to address this this technological uncertainty by imposing a total finite cost limit and ensuring that anytime there is a vehicle purchased that's a zero emission vehicle, it has equivalent functionality of the vehicle being replaced. At the same time, the parties balance that with the requirement that a minimum of 3 of the vehicles being replaced will be zero emission vehicles. And that assures that emission reductions will occur under this order. Additionally, as you'll hear today from the district's witness, there are 2 vehicles that are not proposed for replacement under this order. These are in a different class of non-compliance than the non-compliant vehicles that are scheduled for replacement. As you'll hear from the district witness provide this explanation under Rule 1196, these vehicles don't cause excess emissions, and they have no other replacement other than a diesel vehicle. The district reasonably proposes that rather than requiring a like-for-like replacement, a diesel for another diesel that doesn't provide any significant emission reductions, rather that expenditure be put towards zero emission replacements in other vehicles, cleaner than is otherwise required under the rule, and actually achieves emission reductions under the proposed order. As a result of the parties' negotiations that have been done in good faith with both parties fully engaged in resolving this matter, the district submits that the proposed order fully meets the requirements of good cause that this board must find to issue the order as stipulated. As I mentioned, the district will have 1 witness today, Mr. Brian Cho, who will speak to the district's requirements in the proposed order. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Ms. Nguyen, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Your Honors, and thank you for taking the time today. I agree with Ms. Roberts. Western entered into a stipulated proposed abatement order with the district. And as you will see that the district is willing to replace 6 vehicles with ZEVs, and the district has been committed to doing so. Today's witness will talk a little bit about Weston's operation and why these vehicles are crucial to its purpose of providing public wastewater and water services to over 1 million people in Southern California, and why these fleets are crucial. And also its commitment, both financial and as well as building infrastructure to convert these fleets to ZEVs and to reduce emission, and its future commitment to comply with AQMD rules and regulations. And I just want to emphasize that because Weston is a public agency, there's certain restraints on its financial capabilities, which is why this replacement vehicle schedule is the best compromise in that it affords Weston an ability to go ahead and set forth the replacement schedule while the technology catch up, so that some of the vehicles which may not now currently be available as ZEVs may be available towards the end of the replacement schedule. And Mr. Fike and Mr. Budici will testify to that effect.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Ms. Roberts, did you want to go ahead and present your witness?
Thank you. So, Mr. Cho, could you state and spell your name for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Brian Cho, spelled with B-R-I-A-N. Last name is Cho, C-H-O-E. And program supervisor with the planning group with the South Coast AQMD, overseeing the implementation of our fleet rules.
Thank you. Can you confirm that you took the oath this morning?
Yes, I did.
Thanks. And in your role with the district, how long have you been in that position?
I've been supervising the group since late 2017.
Great. And in your role, are you familiar with the respondent Western Municipal Water District?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the order for abatement petition?
Yes.
And what has been marked as exhibit number 1, the parties proposed stipulated findings?
Yes.
Great. Can you just give us a really brief overview? What does Rule 1196 require?
Okay, the Rule 1196 is one of our fleet rules that applies to public fleets with at least 15 or more heavy-duty vehicles with 14,000 pounds in gross vehicle weight ratings. And the main requirement of the rule is on the purchase requirement. So since 2000, basically July 1, 2002, when the rule actually went into effect, any vehicles that are purchased by public fleets that are subject to this regulation needs to be one of the compliant vehicles, which includes the gasoline fueled, alt fuel, which includes CNGs and LPGs, or the dual fuel.
Does Rule 1196 by its terms require that an entity like Western Municipal Water District always purchase the cleanest vehicle available?
Yeah, the requirement is that you need to purchase one of the rule compliant vehicles, including gasoline, unless it's basically approved by in writing from the district prior to the purchase of the non-compliant vehicle.
Okay, so if there is a choice between compliant vehicles, so say, for example, a zero emission vehicle versus a gasoline vehicle, does Rule 1196 say always buy the cleaner one, buy the zero emission?
No, if it's gasoline is the minimum requirement, so as long as you purchase the gasoline, it would be fine.
And so you mentioned that there are some circumstances where they could purchase a diesel vehicle. Is there a special procedure they need to follow for that?
Yeah, there's a provision called technically infeasible certification request under the rule, and which allows the basically public fleets to request in advance of the purchase to purchase a diesel or some non-rule compliant vehicles for various reasons. One of them being that the vehicles currently available in the market are not suitable to support their operational needs.
So why is it important that that process, that technical infeasibility certificate that you described, why is it important that that be started prior to the purchase of a vehicle?
Well, because the district has to verify that there's no available vehicles in the marketplace that can actually support their operations as they're claimed.
So if a facility came in and submitted a technical infeasibility certificate, does that go in, once it's received by the district, does that go to your group?
Yes, our group handles the review.
Okay. So based on your experience with the rule and its application, are there still some heavy duty vehicles, even though this rule has been in effect for 20 years, are there still vehicles that might get a technical infeasibility certificate?
Yeah, unfortunately, since the rule was adopted back in 2000, there has been a remarkable progress in the clean fuel or so-called alternative fuel vehicles. But unfortunately, on the heavy duty sectors, there hasn't been as much progress as maybe on the light duty side. And 1196 deals with the heavy duties. And there are, especially on the like specialty vehicles, as we will probably go through that in a little more in depth, or vehicles which requires a lot more power and the torque, or some of the operations in very remote locations where you have a limited access to fueling facilities. In those case circumstances, we do find the justifications reasonable and justifiable to approve the purchase of diesel.
So I want to turn a little bit directly to the respondent in this case. When did the district first reach out to the respondent with respect to Rule 1196?
Yeah, this all started back in 2018. We did a comprehensive survey of all the public fleets, and as well as a private contractors that provide service to the public fleets about their vehicles. And the survey was rather simple, which was more of providing the number of vehicles for each categories. And the Western Municipal was one of the respondents. They provided the survey, and based on the information we gathered from the survey, we identify Western Municipal as a potentially having some of the non-compliant diesel vehicles that were purchased since 2002. And in August of 2020, we followed up with what we call AI letter, asking for more in-depth fleet information on heavy-duty vehicles that are subject to 1196.
So what sort of information do you need to determine, if Rule 1196 applies and whether it's being complied with?
Because as explained earlier, this 1196 applies to heavy-duty fleets with 14,000 pounds in GVWR. So obviously, we'll need information on their weight rating, as well as the list of heavy-duty vehicles that are subject to 1196 to make sure that the total number of vehicles are 15 or more, so that are subject to 1196, as well as model years of these vehicles.
So did you confirm based on the information you received that Rule 1196 applies to this respondent?
Yes, we have determined that they are applicable to Western Municipal.
How many vehicles currently does Western have that do not comply with Rule 1196?
Out of their heavy-duty fleets, we have determined that total of 8 heavy-duty vehicles are in basically not in compliance with 1196.
And as a result of this determination, did you participate in discussions with the respondent regarding a schedule of how to come back into compliance with the rule?
Yes, from the moment that, from the time that we got the information back from the Western Municipal on the heavy-duty fleet informations, we've been engaged in discussions through, emails and meetings with the Western Municipal on the mitigation plan and compliance schedule.
And so is the schedule that's included at attachment A of the proposed findings, is that basically the result of those discussions?
Yes.
So I kind of want to walk through the requirements of this order and that schedule. There seem to be 2 groups when we look at attachment A of vehicle replacements. One are labeled as ZEV and one are labeled as not applicable for replacement. Is that right?
Yes.
Let's start with the one labeled as ZEV. Just really quickly, what does ZEV stand for?
ZEV stands for zero emission vehicle.
Is your understanding that many of the zero emission vehicles that are scheduled for replacement might be battery electric?
Yeah, right now, vast majority of zero emission vehicles are of a battery electric options. Yeah.
Okay, but technically to comply with this, it could be any zero emission vehicle and it doesn't have to necessarily be battery electric vehicle. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so you mentioned earlier that Rule 1196 doesn't actually require replacement with zero emission vehicles, right?
That's correct.
So the ones scheduled for zero emission replacements are cleaner than would otherwise be required under the rule, correct?
Yes.
So I want to turn your attention to condition 1 of the order, because that seems to place some limits on requiring zero emission replacements. Is that right?
Correct.
Could you walk us through what those limits are?
So let me just go back and refresh my memories on condition 1. Quick, okay. Yeah, well, the requirement is for the Western Municipal to replace these 6 vehicles with first as a priority with zero emission vehicles if they are available and is allowed under the budgetary restraint they have, and which is explained in the petition as well. And in case even in the future that let's say a zero emission vehicle is not available for any one of these 6 vehicles, in those cases they will be allowed to purchase a gasoline at the time based on the compliance schedules as outlined in the attachment.
Based on your experience and knowledge about respondents' fleet, is it at least possible that some vehicles that are scheduled to be replaced don't have a zero emission vehicle replacement?
I mean, yeah, basically theoretically it's possible. Given the landscape of technology right now and the pace of the progress is being made, we probably expect for this type of vehicles, majority of these vehicle types will be available in at least in the battery electric platform, if not more in different varieties. But that's our expectations with what's going on in technology as well as the regulatory front. But it is certainly a possibility there may be some vehicles they still not be available in zero emission platform.
Would you agree generally that if the later year models being scheduled for replacement have a higher likelihood because we're allowing technology to sort of catch up?
That's correct.
Okay. So from just generally speaking in terms of reducing air pollution emissions, in your opinion, is it a worthwhile trade-off to say wait for a couple extra years till the zero emission is ready versus just buy the gasoline vehicle that we know is possible today sooner?
Yeah, we believe so because there's several factors behind our reasoning for that. Was number one, Western Municipal has a budgetary restraint, so it's not like they'll be able to replace all 6 in the first year. So they are laid out over like 5-year period. So which means even if we allow them to purchase all gasolines, they will be replaced basically over a 5-year period, not at once. And so there's a delay anyway. And second, the given the general, life expectancy or useful life of these heavy-duty vehicles that are operated by public fleets, the range is from somewhere between 18 to 20 years or even longer in many cases. So even though we are taking a small, setback on the upfront emission reductions by waiting for the Western Municipal to replace them with zero emissions, let's say 2-3 years down the road, I think benefit outweighs this negative impact.
And so I believe it's condition number 2, ensures that there are at least some emission reductions from zero emission vehicles, requiring at least 3 vehicles to be zero emission. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I want to turn from those zero emission vehicle replacements to the other 2 vehicles in the order. Those are listed on attachment A as hydrovacs. Can you describe what is a hydrovac to your understanding?
I think I'll probably defer in more detailed explanation to Wendy and Chris and Anthony on later presentations. But generally, these are what we call specialty vehicle. Number one, they are quite expensive. It's probably run somewhere between over $500,000 to even more. And these are used both on routine maintenance as well as in the emergency repairs of the utility lines like water pipes and wastewaters.
So did the district consider, as we were negotiating, requiring them to include these vehicles in the replacement schedule?
Yes.
And what did the district determine as it was evaluating these 2 vehicles specifically?
Okay, we generally in our process, just like very similar to TICR, we asked Western Municipal to provide basically the confirmations or verification from the vendors on the unavailability of these trucks with the rule compliant platforms like gasolines or the CNGs. And also, we also ascertained the justifications they provided as to why these vehicles cannot be supported by gasoline or the CNG. And there were several factors. Number one, main factor was that as evidenced by the information provided by the vendors, the CNG platform hydrovac trucks are underpowered, so will not be able to provide sufficient power as needed for the services. And then even if they were, because of the Western Municipal District has a vast territory to service, over 500 square miles, and some of their locations are very remote and far away from the CNG stations nearby, which is very far in few in between. So in such cases, these vehicles will not be able to provide the services as required, especially during the emergency response.
So if the district were to put in order to replace the hydrovacs, does the district agree that the replacement that's available today would still be a diesel vehicle?
Yeah, unfortunately it is, yeah.
Okay. So just in your opinion, is it better from an air pollution reduction standpoint to focus on get more zero emission vehicles with what replacements we know are possible for that, rather than expend money on buy a slightly cleaner diesel of a slightly newer model year?
Yes, we believe so.
Okay. So looking at the order as a whole, did you calculate excess emissions based on the current proposed order?
Yes, we did. And I think what you see in the petition is actually an outdated number. The correct excess emission amount is slightly higher at 0.186 ton rather than 0.149 ton. The reason for this is because when we calculated the initial number, that was based on the earlier compliance schedule. But after additional negotiations based on the budgetary concerns, it had to be extended out a little bit more, another year or so on some of the purchases. So that resulted in a little slightly higher excess emissions of 0.186 ton.
Okay. Can you?
I just want to add that this is a weighted ton, so it's not just a NOx or ROG. It's a combination of NOx plus ROG plus 20 times PM emissions.
Great. That was going to be my next question. What exactly is a weighted ton?
Okay.
So these are calculated using understanding of the specific vehicles that respondent has times an emission factor that's published by the state. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And last, I want to ask you about an advanced clean fleet rule. Are you familiar with state level mobile source rules?
Yeah, as one of our duty responsibilities to monitor and track all the regulatory development activities at both the state and federal level, including the advanced clean fleet rules.
So can you explain for an entity like the respondent, what does the advanced clean fleet rule require?
So for the public fleets, both state and local agencies like Western Municipal, the requirement is there's like a two-phase requirement. Number one is starting from January 1, 2024, 50% of the new purchases of the heavy-duty vehicles that are subject to advanced clean fleets will have to be a zero emission or near zero emission. Here, near zero emission is not a low NOx trucks or the CNG, which is actually, this is a more of a, basically a hybrid trucks with zero emission operation capability.
And so this is a requirement that's in addition to District Rule 1196, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and so condition 9 of the order, of the proposed order clarifies that anything in the order would be separate from and in addition to any state level requirements, including the advanced clean fleet rule, right?
That's correct.
So based on your understanding, as you've reviewed this proposed order and the schedule for replacement, the proposed schedule doesn't require the respondent to purchase any vehicles in a way that would not comply with the advanced clean fleet.
Yes.
Okay, so they're not conflicting to the best of your knowledge.
Yes.
Okay, those are all of my questions. Thank you, Mr. Cho.
Thank you. Do you have questions for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Board members, I'm going to go ahead and start with, where exactly was that information in regards to the excess emissions? Was it in the petition you mentioned?
It's in the page 7 of the exhibit.
Okay, at page 7.
11, I believe. Paragraph 11.
I've got 11, okay.
Line 14, page 4. I mean, the findings.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, and the other question I had, and it's probably going to be for Western, but if you know this, has there been any discussion with CCERT? Because they've been working on the heavy duty compliant vehicles.
Discussion with CSER? Oh, we have not, no.
Okay. I think my question, I'm going to wait until they present their case and I'll ask my questions because it's more a question of what are they doing in addition to not just purchasing the vehicles, but also consideration to install solar, things like that. So I'll go ahead and wait for that. Board members, any other questions you have? Mr. Pearman?
First, just a question about the findings mentioned, and you mentioned April 21, 2021, you issued a notice to comply, engaging in active negotiations since. Why does it take 2 years to conclude negotiations on this point?
Well, actually, before the NTC was issued in April 2021, I also mentioned that we issued the what we call additional information letter in August of 2020 as a sort of initial starter. And then after receiving information on the heavy duty fleet, the NTC was more to ask them to provide a compliance plan, which is not just limited to the information on heavy duty fleet, but what they are going to do to mitigate the non-compliance.
So you're saying it normally takes 2 years to conclude the negotiation? It seems like a long time is what I'm getting at.
Okay, then in terms of okay, I see. In terms of negotiations, why did it take so long since 2021? If that's what you're. First of all, in terms of negotiating this, this compliance with the replacement vehicles that are rule compliant is rather tedious and complex because number one, again, mostly with these agencies, they have a budgetary concerns. So, and the EVs and the, actual rule compliant vehicles, if it's not gasoline, like a CNGs or, more, let's say cleaner vehicles, they're rather more expensive. And it also, if the agency does not have an infrastructure or the main, let's say the personnel that are, equipped to service these new type of vehicle, which if they don't have a CNG yet, now this opens up the new areas they have to explore. And also, as we were saying, a lot of these vehicles are not suitable with rule compliant platforms. So those things takes time, and also these are public agencies that like us. And instead of, I think my understanding is, at least with the district's approach, is to instead of using a heavy hand, we try to work with them and try to work out a solution together in collaboration, rather than say issuing an NOV, which would have been the next step to force them to purchase something either they cannot afford or it may not be suitable for their operations.
We've seen a few of these come before us. Do you know if there are still agencies out there that you're still negotiating with on this type of issue?
Yes, we still have several more.
The proposed order at 1A small I talks about getting one or more ZEVs are commercially available at the time of purchase. So in terms of the language of this proposed order and attachment, the time of purchase would mean the same as what you call the purchase order date on attachment 1, would you say?
Yes.
And then continuing down to 1B small I, which gives them this option to purchase a Rule 1196 compliant gasoline fueled vehicle for such the applicable. First, that's probably awkward there. For such, probably should be stricken. But it doesn't say when to purchase that rule compliant gasoline fueled vehicle. So if they chose this option in 1B small I, would that purchase date be the same date as the previously scheduled vehicle attachment A, or something to be determined?
Well, I think it basically will be purchased no later than 30 days from the delivery of the purchased gas. No. Yeah, it's the same. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's removed from service language, as though.
Yeah, it is. We expect them to purchase gasoline fueled vehicles at the same date of the delivery date.
The same date as the delivery date. So you mean
No.
in the attachment A for the vehicle being replaced?
Okay, so when I say purchase means actually including the delivery by the same delivery date. So the purchase order should be made at the same date as the purchase order of the, I guess, the ZEV vehicle that are on the compliance plan.
So I read that as the same date as what was the purchase order date for the vehicle being replaced.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Balagopalan?
Yes, morning, Mr. Cho.
Good morning.
You made a comment, and I think it's also in the finding and decision document, that there's no excess emission from the 2 hydrovac unit. And what's the, I don't understand the logic in that.
Well, I mean, I guess there's two types of a violation of the rule, so to speak. Well, the rule itself requires that you to purchase a rule compliant vehicle. And then if in case you didn't purchase a rule compliant vehicle, we need to calculate what should be the excess emissions for the purpose of this hearing petition. But for the hydrovacs, as we basically explained earlier, even if they go out today and purchase a diesel vehicle, the emissions will be same as the vehicle they have purchased. Because number one, the vehicle they have purchased model year 2019 and 2020. So these are practically new vehicle. So emission factors we would use to calculate the emissions from that brand new truck would be basically the same as the emissions that we calculated from these existing hydrovac trucks. So considering that there's no emission difference, even though these vehicles were purchased in violation of Rule 1196, what we, these are, basically what we consider as an admin violation. The only reason that, that basically we ding them for violation is because they didn't seek approval prior to the purchase, rather than they purchased the vehicle that cause an excess emission because they are diesel and dirtier than the rule compliant vehicle they should have purchased instead. So that's a distinction between first 6 vehicles. Yes, there are rule compliant vehicles are available even today, or even maybe when I purchased them. But the hydrovac trucks, even today, if they submit a TICR, we would actually approve the purchase. So the violation is mere an admin violation rather than actually causing excess emissions. That's how we are defining why they don't have an excess emission, because if we're calculating if it's same emissions for the rule compliant vehicle, well, I shouldn't say the TICR approved vehicles, which will be a brand new diesel, will be same as the ones they purchased.
But they didn't submit a TICR for
Correct.
evaluation, so you have not done an in-depth review to see if there's alternate vehicle.
No, actually, one of the reason it took 2 years to actually come to this agreement was we did a lot more than actually typical TICR review for these 2 vehicles. It took much longer to evaluate and to see if there are any available the rule compliant vehicles that can actually do the job. And as I explained earlier, because of the power that's needed, which is underpowered, lack of fueling facilities nearby. So the gasoline number 1 is not an option because it's certainly is not even available for this size. But for CNG, it is available, but based on underpowered blowers and the pump, so they will not be able to use them, and so, or at least in the same efficient manner, as well as on no nearby fueling stations, which means they cannot really use those vehicles, especially during emergency operations.
So my question again, did they submit a TICR as per the rule?
No, so that's why they were considered non-compliant vehicles.
Non-compliant vehicle. So they did not submit the TICR 60 days prior to purchase.
Correct.
Vehicle, and they're operating 2 of those vehicles, which are non-compliant with 1196. And essentially they're running with excess emission, even though you're making that administrative determination that there's no excess emission.
Yeah, because the way we calculate excess emissions is, we have to calculate based on if they purchase a rule compliant vehicle, let's say it could be gasoline or CNG that are cleaner than the vehicle they purchased, the delta is the excess emissions. But if they can only purchase another diesel, especially like I said, these are brand new diesels as well, the emission factors we'll be using would be same. So in reality, when you look at the emissions, of existing hydrovac as well versus the brand new hydrovac truck they could purchase, which would be a diesel, the emission would be same. So when you take the difference, it would be 0. So when we say there's no excess emissions, or we could say there's a 0 excess emissions calculated rather, maybe that's a language we can maybe further clarify.
When I first read this, it's almost like, you submit an application, let's say for a permit appeal, and you submit it within 30 days, but you submit in 45 days, and you make the determination, oh yeah, had they submitted in 30 days, we would have granted it. But, because there was a valid reason for it. But since they're late, the agency would say, first of all, no, you don't qualify because you submitted it late. So here they're in violation. They didn't submit the TICR. They're operating that with excess emission. Let me put it there. Have you looked at offsetting those? How many? Let me back up a little bit. How many other heavy duty vehicles do they operate besides this 8?
The total of 21 heavy duty vehicles that are subject to 1196.
Have you looked at the option or discussed with the Western Municipal the option of offsetting the emission by retiring a couple of existing heavy duty vehicles that have mileage and age and emission, calculation that are done that could offset those emissions during for these 2 vehicles?
We have that's one options that we explored, but I think that out of 21, they don't have any vehicles that are not too old. Number one, there is a sort of kind of a guidelines we usually follow. because we cannot give credit for let's say turning over, let's say 20-plus-year-old vehicles, which we think is part of a natural turnover cycle rather than it's a voluntary turnover. So those have vehicles, based on today, we're looking at maybe 2002 or newer vehicle would qualify. But since 2002 is the year that this rule kicked in terms of effectiveness, they don't have that many vehicles to begin with that would consider the rule compliant and exempt from the 1196 purchase requirement that are diesel that could be turned over to brand new diesel at this time. So we looked at the vehicle they have and negotiated. And then what we have determined instead was, since there are surplus reductions that we can calculate from going further and above and beyond what's required, which is gasoline for the first 6. So there's a delta emission reduction by going to 0. And in addition to that, they're committed to installing a zero emission infrastructure to support those heavy duty vehicles, which we thought is actually a good option.
You're saying those are requirements in the rule, or the rule requires the fleet should be one of many, which one of them is alternate heavy duty fuel vehicle, which is electric or dual fuel, or.
Well, correct, but they can, if they go with the gasoline, which is the minimum option, which is definitely not a zero emissions, they still comply with 1196. So yes, you can go all the way to 0 as part of the rule compliance. But what we're saying is, in most cases, because of budgetary constraints, first option they would go with would be the gasoline option, which is number one, they are available. Number two, is far cheaper than, let's say, battery electric option, which is like probably somewhere between 2.5 to 3 times higher. So these are the commitment they're making. So they're basically forking out extra funds to replace them with, rather than easy option, which is a gasoline option, to zero emission, and plus the zero emission fueling infrastructure or charging infrastructure, which is also something that's not publicly available. So that's something that's extra cost.
So my question is more basic.
Yeah.
If the rule requires one of those few, can you give them credit beyond what the rule requires? The rule requires you can go with ZEV, right? That's the first option there.
No, rule does not require you go with ZEV. Rule requires that you go at least get gasoline or more. So that's where we are calculating the delta credit, because if they have yes, the minimum requirement is the gasoline, but if they're electing to go with the zero emissions, we can definitely calculate there is basically a surplus emission reductions that they are achieving by going above and beyond what's minimum required.
The rule doesn't say that, unless you can point to me where it says that. It says you can replace with purchase of alternate heavy vehicle, dual fuel, or dedicated vehicle. So my question is, the argument that, okay, because they're going ZEV, that will give them additional credit. What I mean is, just like back, you don't go beyond back, you don't get credit prices, emission reduction beyond back. So that's what I'm hearing that I find a little bit problematic. Now, let me ask another question. I think it was brought up that this is an emergency vehicle. Is it truly emergency, or they use it because I know they are going to make a presentation. I'll ask them about that.
Why don't we wait until they do make the presentation?
Yeah, no,
So
but
they
I'm
can
asking
answer
because
questions.
he mentioned emergency. That's why I'm asking the question. Are they truly an emergency vehicle in your?
Well, they are not emergency as defined under 1196. That's why what I said is the emergency during emergency, but we define these vehicles as emergency response vehicles. So these are used during the emergency, like a flooding or and the natural disasters. And it's critical that these vehicles are available and operate reliably. And one of the issues we have with the CNG vehicle during time of emergencies is that we're not confident ourselves that the vehicles will be able to provide the required support during the emergency, which could take durations of days to provide the support. And a lot of times, what we learned from other agencies, not just limited to Western Municipal, is that these vehicles may require mobile refueling. For the diesel, you have approved mobile refuelers, where the CNGs right now currently The fire department do not approve mobile refillers. So that's one of the limitations we have of the CNGs, let's say vehicles for this type of purpose.
Just a short answer. So you looked at the exemption and said said they don't qualify for under that provision. Or
Oh, okay, they do not qualify under the
That's all I wanted
1196.
to-
Yeah. that's-
Thank you. I have no other question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members? Absolutely. Okay, you have no other witnesses, is that correct, Ms. Roberts?
Correct.
Okay, so we can go ahead and go on to your witness, your first witness, Ms. Wind.
Thank you. And we actually prepare a presentation. We'd like to share a screen, asking Madam Clerk to give me permission to do so.
Day, can we have Ms. Wang give permission to share screen?
And my question is also, can Dr. Abraham see it?
Let's see. I don't think it's been shared yet.
Okay, I see the function to share screen.
We can see it now.
Okay, great. You can see it.
Thank you. And the way we prepare. Thank you, Your Honors. The way we prepare our testimony today is in the form of a presentation, and I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Fike and Mr. Budichin for the presentation to discuss Weston's fleet and the essential public services it provides and the importance of the hydrovac and how it responds to emergency circumstances to protect public health and safety. And with that, I'll hand it over to Anthony here.
Okay, we're presenting in PDF, so bear with us. Scroll down, okay. Okay, we did brief introductions, but we'll do them again. Chris.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, my name is Chris Fike. I am the Deputy Director of Maintenance Operations at Western Municipal Water District. I've been with the district 9 years, and I have 30 years of professional experience in the water and sewer utility. It is. I can get closer. Check, check. Yeah.
And my name is Anthony Budichin. I am the Environmental Regulatory Compliance Manager at Western Water. I have 3 years with Western Water and 10 years of environmental regulatory experience, and I have a BS and MS in environmental sciences. Okay, here's a quick overview of what we're going to discuss today in the presentation. We'll talk a little bit about who Western Water is, Western Water's plans regarding this stipulated order, the replacement schedule that's proposed, our important considerations for us, Western Water's commitment. And this image over on the right-hand side is a shot from our operations headquarters. It's located in Riverside. The magnified image shows the headquarters itself. As you can see in the surrounding area, it's very rural. This is where our heavy-duty fleet and a majority of all of our fleet vehicles are housed. So they start and end their day here. Okay, who we are, Western Water. Well, we provide drinking water, recycled water, and wastewater services to nearly 1 million people. We have partnerships with 14 agencies and 27 mutual aid agreements. These partnerships with 14 agencies include the obligation to provide wholesale water to other agencies. What that means is we provide water for other agencies to provide their customers. On top of that, we also serve nearly 25,000 direct connections, over 100,000 people directly. So not only do we have the wholesale water obligation, but we also provide water directly to our customers and ratepayers. We are a member agency of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and we operate 170 public water and wastewater facilities. We are a partner in overseeing the Santa Ana watershed and Inland Empire Brine Line. The Inland Empire Brine Line is a conveyance system for sending high saline waste out to Orange County so we don't pollute our waterways. We are a public agency, so we have a board of directors. We have a 5-member board who are all publicly elected, and being that we're public, our budget requires board approval. The image on the left-hand side is a map of our service area. We were established in 1954 to deliver imported water. When we started, the focus was on only providing wholesale water to other agencies. We have greatly evolved since. We now do drinking water, wastewater, sewer, recycled water, stormwater capture, recharge, groundwater management, and desalination. Our heavy-duty fleet is essential to ensuring we provide these services. We are located in Western Riverside County. We cover 527 square miles with a total population of nearly 1 million, 25% of which is a disadvantaged community. Our retail water customer portfolio consists of 46% local supply and 54% imported water. Of that imported water, that equates out to about 70,000 to 90,000 acre feet a year served annually to our customers. Going back to the image, if it's kind of hard to see up here, but there's gradient lines within that service area. Those are our direct serve customers. Then the overall service area, that 527 square miles, covers the rest of it. But those colors indicate agencies or cities that we provide water directly to or can in the event of emergency. They include the city of Norco, city of Corona, Temescal Valley Water District, Elsinore Valley Water District, both located within Elsinore. And then also Box Springs Mutual Water Company, which is a little small portion near Moreno Valley and Riverside. In addition, we can provide water in emergencies to the city of Riverside and Eastern Municipal Water District. Eastern covers the eastern portion of Riverside County. Again, our heavy duty fleet is essential to ensuring we're able to provide these services. Western Water is actually responsible for providing 35% of the overall water in this total area. We are an essential public service provider, and these heavy duty vehicles, they help us maintain 855 miles of water piping, 170 water and sewer facilities, 54 drinking water pump stations, 33 reservoirs and tanks, 25 wastewater pumping stations, 7 drinking water production wells, 2 wastewater treatment plants, and 1 drinking water treatment plant. We're here to talk about our heavy duty fleet, and so we want to provide a little bit of context. This chart here shows the number of heavy duty fleet vehicles in terms of number of vehicles on the y-axis, and it's plotted against the x-axis, which depicts the number of years. You can see when Rule 1196 began and the purchase requirements became effective in 2002, we only had 11 heavy duty fleet vehicles. And our fleet began to increase over the years, and that is because our responsibilities increased. We took over services such as overseeing the March Air Reserve Base. We put on both drinking water and wastewater obligations, which added a new wastewater treatment plant to our purview. In addition, we also oversaw and took over the Murrieta service area for drinking water and wastewater services. Crossing over that 15 vehicle threshold, fast forward to 2018, as Mr. Cho highlighted, we completed the fleet vehicle survey. And then in 2020, AQMD staff had reached out requesting further information and clarification because it appeared that we had purchased vehicles under Rule 1196 applicability, which we did, and we acknowledge that we are looking for steps forward. It was an oversight on our part. So what is our plan? Well, we're proposing to install zero emission vehicle infrastructure. Zero emission vehicles are one thing, but we know that they take infrastructure to charge them, and so we are looking into that. We, as of now, the proposal is to replace 6 heavy duty diesel vehicles over the next 5 fiscal years with zero emission vehicles. And I say as of now only because the outcome of this hearing, this is our goal, and this is what we want to do. We are requesting to keep the 2 essential service vehicles, the hydro excavation vacuum trucks, the hydrovac trucks, which will be discussed further by Chris Fike. And as Mr. Cho said, there are no other commercially available non-diesel alternatives. We are proposing that we will implement a heavy duty fleet purchasing policy, and we're going to develop a fleet electrification plan, one of which is already in development with a consultant. I'm not going to do too much on the TICR because I think it's been discussed, but essentially based on the current diesel technology and alternatives, there's nothing else, and it would have qualified for a TICR if we would have submitted for it. But again, that was an oversight on our part. We have a proposed replacement schedule, and there's a reason we have to do this in a stepwise manner. These vehicles are needed to provide essential public services, so we cannot just take these vehicles offline. We won't be able to provide service to our ratepayers or the public. We are public, so everything has to be board approved. The funding provided to us is based on rates. The rates are established on a 4-year rate schedule, and prior to that, we have to undergo a rate review, which is a process in its own that takes 2 years. Once rates are in place, we have funding mechanism, then we bring budget requests before the board, and that is on a 2-year cycle. Additionally, the replacement vehicle availability. Our goal here is to replace with zero emission vehicles. Zero emission vehicles are available in the heavy duty format, but some of our vehicles are very specialized and current availability is not there. With a replacement schedule, though, we are allowing for more time for that technology to develop, giving us the chance to replace with zero emission. And then the infrastructure. Charging very large zero emission vehicles takes a lot of infrastructure, and so we need a timeline to do so.
Mr. Budichin, before you move on, I want to focus a little bit about the rate schedule. When you mentioned the 4-year rate schedule, as a public agency, is Weston subject to certain regulation and laws such as Prop 218 to justify any increase in rate?
It is.
Okay. And how long does that process usually take?
A good process takes about 2 years.
And who pays for those rates?
The ratepayers.
And if I heard you correct earlier, you mentioned 25% of Weston's service area is disadvantaged communities, right?
That is correct.
And so it would be those residents in those disadvantaged community, including those residents in those disadvantaged community who will have to pay for the higher rates. Is that right?
That would be correct.
Okay. Apology for interruption.
Here's the replacement schedule. We won't go too much into detail, but essentially we're proposing to replace 6 heavy duty vehicles with zero emission vehicles over the next 5 fiscal years. One more thing to note. You see that we put the service trucks up front, and that is because the availability of zero emission vehicles is, there is confirmed availability, and it is more likely that there will be continued availability for those. Whereas the dump truck and crane truck, those are the more larger specialty vehicles, which we're going to hopefully see technology advance to where there will be zero emission options for those.
Apologies to interrupt for a minute. What you see on the Exhibit A on this slide, I just want to note that we organize this chart in chronological order. So it may appear a little bit different to attachment A to the proposed stipulated order, but it is the same schedule. We just want to organize it in chronological order, so it's a little bit clearer.
One note on this slide, we put this together prior to today, and I think with the changes in emission calculations, this might slightly change, but I think it conveys the overall message we're trying to send here. These are the emission reductions with the zero emission vehicle purchases. On the y-axis, it's emissions in tons per year weighted, combined with the NOx, ROG, and PM combined. And the purple bar shows the reductions with gasoline vehicles. So if we were to replace only with gasoline vehicles, which we have the option to, all 6 of those heavy duty vehicles, the purple bar kind of represents that emissions total. Numbers slightly changing because of the emission changes provided today by Mr. Cho. But then that yellow bar is the additional reduction we get from zero emission vehicle purchases. And it was a 19% improvement. I don't have the exact calculation now, but I'd be happy to rerun the calculation later on if it was of question. And I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Fike now to just discuss our heavy duty fleet.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into some of the equipment, specifically here, the units that are in question for retirement, starting with my left, the service vehicle you see there with the utility body. Those are used district-wide for water and sewer repair and emergency response, as are all the vehicles shown. But those vehicles in particular are the first 4 vehicles on the replacement list. They house all of our hand tools and some ancillary equipment like cranes, compressors, welders, things of that nature. Again, critical to our response, whether it be preventative maintenance measures, reactive maintenance, or emergency response. In the center image here, we show a dump truck which we do use to tow excavation equipment from time to time, in addition to hauling spoils from excavation. So perhaps aggregate, asphalt, concrete, things of that nature. And then all the way on my left, the crane truck the flatbed is used to haul large segments of pipe from time to time as needed, and the crane lifts them into position as we need to place them. It's also used for elevated picks, removal of equipment from high positions that are heavy, too heavy for folks to carry, and or the removal of stationary rotating equipment that you might find, say, a pump or a motor at ground level. So those are some of the pieces of the puzzle that were up for consideration today. Next slide, please. The two back trucks in question that we're humbly requesting permission to keep, again, very specialized. The lower image, you can just see the blue reel at the front of the truck. That's a jet reel hose that's used for cleaning the interior of sewer lines. Those tanks are about 3,000 gallons in capacity. Very specialized vacuum trucks. You could think of it akin to a shop vac, a wet dry vac that you might use at home. Next slide, please. So again, these trucks are essential for our underground public utility response to emergency and routine maintenance. Showcasing an image here of a leak that we would respond to. Oftentimes the leaks are of such great volume that the trucks are required to run round robin. So we might have one vacuuming up this sanitary sewer overflow with another one right behind it. Again, as previously mentioned, a portable diesel fueler may be required at that point in emergency response to keep those vehicles running round robin to prevent sewage overflow from reaching the public or waters of the state. I also wanted to take a moment to discuss underground service alert. This is a requirement that the utilities come and mark the pavement before it's opened up. So we have a good indicator as to what we're dealing with when we open up the streets. As you might imagine, there's a myriad of infrastructure and network piping underneath the streets we drive every day. Oftentimes our water and sewer utilities underneath gas, electric, things of that nature. These vacuum trucks are crucial in the excavation of those environments because they're very surgical in the way that they can remove the dirt and water from around those other pipelines and prevent unwanted injuries, right? Protect the safety of not only our team, but the public at large. Next slide, please. I wanted to highlight a sanitary sewer overflow, talk a little bit more about our mutual aid agreements with other agencies, whether it be cities and or other special sister districts. We work together as needed to help one another out. But our service with these vac trucks really goes beyond that. Here is a series of 3 images where our team members responded to a mobile home park that's not within our service area where they had a problem with their sewer system and it overflowed. And in order for us to keep this putrid waste from entering the stream bed, we needed to run both vacuum trucks around robin to keep not only our team safe, but the public at large and the environment as a whole. So next slide, please.
Mr. Fike, before we move on, can you tell me a little bit about how recently you have to utilize these hydrovacs?
Sure. This response was just 1 month ago. So again, some important considerations regarding the 2 hydrovacs. They're essential for public safety and they're ratepayer funded. As Mr. Cho mentioned, these 2 units in particular were purchased in 19 and 20 to the tune of $1.5 million. These are public funds, and we want to continue to use public funds in a way that's most prudent, right? We want to be good stewards of public funds, and again, the vehicles are limited due to their specialty. and there's a lack of commercially available options for those particular vehicles we're discussing. Next slide, please. Our commitment is to reduce emissions, produce some infrastructure, and continue to provide environmental stewardship. The way we're going to do that is through the purchase of these EVs. We're going to install the charging stations, and we're going to provide a fleet electrification plan. Of course, this won't be done in a vacuum. We'll work with Mr. Cho and team to ensure that we have prior approval to doing so. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit more about the charging stations themselves. Our commitment is to purchase chargers. We've got prior approval from the board to do that to the tune of $60,000. And we will be using some in-house labor in conjunction with Southern California Edison to help us with the installation of the infrastructure. Next slide, please. You may be familiar with the Charge Ready Transport program provided by Southern California Edison. That affords individuals like Western Municipal Water District and other agencies to take advantage of dollars that are available through the state to provide infrastructure to move the governor's mandate forward. We're taking advantage of that and have a conceptual layout, and contingent upon your approval here today, we'd like to take that back to our board and get their approval for the installation of up to 10 heavy-duty charging stations. And these will not only be available to provide charging to the medium and heavy-duty fleet, but also will be able to be manipulated such that we could charge routine vehicles as well, regular transit vehicles. Next slide. So we talked a little bit about the commercial availability and how we'd like to take a little bit more time for the larger vehicles that I previously showcased and wait for technology to catch up. After some discussion with Mr. Cho and team, we quickly realized that we needed to find some replacements for our service vehicles, the utility body vehicles. We did so, and they are readily available, and there's an image of that here today. This is a 14,500 gross vehicle weight rated utility body style truck, and these would be the units that we would look to replace first, with approval, of course, and following this schedule as outlined here with fiscal year and funding. Next slide, please. So again, just to reiterate Western Water's commitment to you here today, we are committed to developing a heavy-duty fleet purchasing policy, a fleet electrification master plan, replacement of 6 heavy-duty fleet vehicles as previously mentioned. We humbly request to keep the 2 hydrovacs. We are willing to and committed to invest in the charging stations. Again, our Charge Ready Transport program is in place, and that's one of the provisions to get that over the finish line. We committed to the year-over-year funding mechanism established as outlined in our capital improvement plan. These are the year-over-year dollars that we've already showcased. And of course, our continued commitment to communication with yourselves and Brian Cho and team to ensure that we're following the outlined and stipulated order. And with that, we're happy to take any questions you have of us today. Thank you.
Ms. Roberts, you have questions for this witness?
Just a couple. I think, Mr. Budichin, I think this might be appropriately addressed to you, but please correct me if I'm wrong. You mentioned that you have a board that adopts your budget regularly for your agency. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you know if your board has had an opportunity to review the proposed order?
They have.
And has your board committed to the funding necessary to the replacement schedule that has been proposed by the parties?
Contingent upon our discussion here today. Yes.
Great. Okay. And then my only other question, I think, Mr. Fike, might be for you. You mentioned that the total outlay for your hydrovacs purchased recently was about 1.5 million. So that was 2 vehicles. Correct? So that's about $750,000 on average per hydrovac if you were hypothetically to purchase one today?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Those are all of my questions.
Thank you. Board members, you have questions? Go ahead, Mr. Balagopalan.
Right. I look at the chart, it identifies one as the gap wax, which we see in the picture.
Yes,
Is
sir.
the 4700 SF similar to the one we see in the picture?
Both units are gap backs models. Yes, sir.
Gap wax. Except one is not used as much as the other because the mileage is about 13,000 for the gap wax in the table. The other one is 3,000 miles average.
I believe I might provide some clarification. I think when this originally started, those calculations or the mileage calculations, it was during COVID. I think because we just had purchased those vehicles, COVID hit, and I think we just began utilizing that new vehicle. And so I think that mileage for the calculation purposes was extrapolated out. I think Mr. Cho.
For the hydrovac, as we were saying, the emissions, we didn't calculate the excess emissions because basically it's a comparable new model would be the same emission.
Okay, yeah, the lower mileage is just indicative of when this was first put together and the timing of it. Those both trucks are utilized pretty equally.
And you, Superintendent, you're familiar with the rule 1196, correct?
I am.
And the exemption in the rule to, if you have 15 or more that are non-compliant, you can take 3 out, or, the other exemptions, but you don't qualify for any of the exemptions, correct?
Because of our existing fleet right now, that is correct.
Right now, you don't. I understand the reason to continue using a hydrovac, and I've seen them in my neighborhood also. My question is, and I ask Mr. Cho, has there been discussion about offsetting those emissions? Because even though I'm hearing that there's no excess emission, but in reality, there is excess emission, even though you cannot get a comparable one, which is non-diesel right now, correct?
I think that, so you're inferring that because they weren't just with the TICR already.
Yeah, well, you're in violation because you didn't do the TICR. If have you done that, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah,
basically.
no, I thank you for clarifying, Your Honor. So I think, part of that 2-year process that we went through with negotiations, where we are now doesn't indicate where we started. And I think part of those negotiations brought us to this proposal of 6 zero-emission vehicles. I think with the additional offsets provided by the zero-emission vehicles over the gasoline alternative, which we are allowed to purchase, we feel that offset is a justification for keeping those.
Except, again, I think as I pointed out, those are options that are in the rule. So you can get credit beyond what is required by the rule.
You are correct in that, but I think the basic option allowed by the rule is gasoline. And so maybe looking at it from the rule applicability verbatim, it could be said, hey, there's still excess emissions, but from our perspective, we're going above and beyond and doing the zero emission vehicles, which we're not required to do.
Right. And I think that part of the problem, and I read the, I think it's been clarified, now, because when I read it, I was like, there's no logic in saying that there's no excess emission and the way it was worded. But I understand now a little better, what the rationale is, and that there was a look at excess emission. And so my question is, are there vehicles that you could take out of service, diesel, that have high mileage that could offset these emissions?
The vehicles in question,
yeah.
The vehicles in question right now, these 8 are our primary use vehicles. And you could tell by the model years, we've purchased these for the use, but in terms of older.
I'm sorry, let me clarify, not this 8 existing, the fleet that are not part of 1196.
We do have older vehicles, but they're not utilized. They're more of a backup purpose. So say we had something go offline and we're not emergency in the sense of Rule 1196, like police fire, but we need to be able to respond. So if we had one of our Vector trucks, which could take, how long did they take to replace or repair sometimes?
We've had them out for 1 or 2 weeks at a time easily in Los Angeles. So there's quite a commute there.
Yeah.
But I think a piece of it is the fact that through our negotiations and discussion with Mr. Cho and team, we talked a little bit about what we have and how they're utilized and how that might impact emissions. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cho, that it was determined that there wasn't a great deal of value in taking those off the road because the usage was so low. Is that correct?
Yes, a couple of vehicles we looked at. These are what they term as backup vehicles. So on an averaging, I think they were like less than 1,000 miles, like a 500-600 miles on average use. So given that the very low usage, when we calculated the emissions that could be possibly offset, even as a that could actually emissions reduction achieved will be even less than the going above and beyond between the gasoline and the zero emission vehicle for these 6.
No, thank you for that clarification. That helps me a lot more than what, when I first read this. Okay, I have no further question. Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? I do have a few. Your existing infrastructure for charging. It's just off the grid?
Madam Chair, we currently have no infrastructure for charging.
What's your plan
ZEVs.
for it? What's your plan for that?
We're working with Southern California Edison. We have a preliminary plan in place contingent upon the outcome of this discussion here today. We'll take that back to our board for approval. We have
Okay.
dollars budgeted for the chargers themselves and Edison to help us.
Has there been any discussion and or inquiry into having solar installed to provide the electricity for these vehicles and possibly even for your facility there?
So the facility currently has 1 megawatt of solar panels. It's a power purchase agreement, unfortunately. However, there has been some discussion about buying that purchase agreement out.
I would strongly recommend that you do that because you may be able to power up these vehicles through solar. I do that now myself at home, and it's you end up paying far less for the fuel, let's say fuel, which in this case is electricity, to power up those vehicles. And that could be part of the offset as well. So I would strongly recommend that you get some kind of an estimate that you can also take to your board, because I think that they would be interested in that, because you'd be saving quite a bit of money in the long run. This really is deliberation, and I'm not asking you enough questions. However, so has there been any discussion or presentation to your board in reference to utilization of solar?
I don't know that this has made it to the board level regarding the utilization of solar for the buyout of the power purchase agreement yet. I do not know. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay, great. I would like to see that, because I think that could be not only monetarily savings in the long run, it also could be, like I said before, part of the offset. The other question that I had asked earlier, and are you working with any of the academia who are working on heavy duty vehicles that are electric?
I can share that with respect to working with the schools, University of California, Riverside, we partner with to review our energy usage up to 15-minute intervals to evaluate where we might be able to save some dollars. As a result of that, we recently installed the Tesla brand Mega Pack at one of our pumping stations, for example. So we're committed to ensuring that we're keeping our environment clean. Beyond that, the research that's been done with respect to what's out there for bigger vehicles, we've only scratched the surface and gone to some seminars and conferences. And of course, Mr. Cho and team have provided us with a great deal of insight as to where we might gain more information. But that's the extent of our engagement with academia.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and I'll wait for deliberation, but those are the only questions that I had. Okay. Did you have any other witnesses that you wanted to present? Okay. All right. Then we can go ahead and, are there any members of, oh, she's not there. I don't see any members of the public. Oh, you are there. Okay.
Madam Chair, no hands are raised. by any members of the public or even Dr. Abraham at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. And with that, no other questions from board members.
Clarification, and maybe Mr. Cho, you can help me this one. This is on the order and page 1C.
Okay.
So, the hydrovacs are not subject to replacement. That's, in the order. However, if they choose to replace it, they have to submit a TICR now, if they want to replace it. Is that what it?
Yeah, basically, first of all, they are allowed to keep them and to replace them based on their natural turnover cycle. So it's not like they're required to be, turning them over within the OA term of 5 years. So we expect them, obviously, eventually, they'll be replacing them. But in order to ensure that they're in compliance with 1196 for the replacement purchase, they'll submit the TICR review to, number one, in case they need to purchase another, let's say diesel vehicle. Let's say, in the future, they'll have to, submit a TICR for our approval. If they're purchasing a gasoline or rule compliant vehicle, then they are not required to submit a
Okay,
TICR.
so it's only for light replacement if they're going to do in the future?
Yes, right.
Okay. All right, okay. Can I say some of this could be better worded so it's a little clearer, but okay, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Okay, no other questions? All right, Ms. Roberts, did you want to give us a closing?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the hearing board. I think you've heard quite a bit of testimony today about the rationale as to why we got to the order that we did. I want to just emphasize a couple of elements that I think were discussed in testimony. First, the idea that this is an order that is technology forcing. This is going to move the technology forward cleaner than is otherwise required. I think that has been a little bit of confusion. Rule 1196 does mention alternative fueled heavy duty vehicles, but it does not require their purchase. It does not require cleanest available vehicle. It only requires compliant, and compliant could be any on the list. And I think as Mr. Cho and both the respondent's testimony provided, if they're only limited to just what's compliant, they basically have a responsibility to their own ratepayers to choose the cheapest option available. And that will not get you the same amount of emission reductions. This order moves us further toward the ultimate intent of the rule to move us towards a lower emission future, but does so responsibly in a path that is possible for an agency that is funded by ultimately ratepayers like this respondent. And because of that balance, the district submits that there is absolutely good cause to enter this order as adopted. I do want to mention that from exhibit number 1, based on the testimony you've heard, we do submit that correction to the proposed findings that Mr. Cho mentioned in his testimony to the total excess emissions. And that's on page 4, paragraph number 11. The parties have also discussed this morning another typographical error that we would also submit to correct. And this is on page 7 of the order, and it's condition number 10. That deals with the ending date of jurisdiction under the hearing board. Currently, it's listed as December 31st, 2029. That should be March 31st, 2030 to account for the fact that the schedule is actually in fiscal year rather than just calendar year. And that was an oversight that the parties did not intend. And with those corrections, the district submits that there is good cause to enter the order as proposed by the parties. Thank you.
Ms. Roberts, where was that located? The date?
Page number 7 of the order, and it's condition number 10 that starts at line 17.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
Of-
So it should be March.
March 31st of 2030.
Madam Chair, can I have a clarification again on page 4, number 11? It should say total emissions rather than weighted emissions. Is that correct?
No, based on Mr. Cho's testimony, page 4, number 11, instead of 0.149, it should read 0.186.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, Ms. Wind, your closing.
I want to start off by thanking each member for your time and consideration and for the great questions you posed. And thanks to Mr. Cho and Ms. Roberts. One of the things I want to emphasize is that we reached the stipulated order over extensive negotiation. I wanted to point out that Mr. Cho fought really hard for several different ways to offset the emission. And the reason why it took 2 years is because we have to respond to all of Mr. Cho's question because he really pushed hard and develop creative ways to think about all the other ways we could offset the emission. And this stipulated order represent the 2 year hard work that both sides put together about what's, one, technically possible, two, physically responsible, and three, what is really in the public interest and good. The reality is that Weston is a public agency that provides essential services. Its vehicles are called on constantly to prevent public health disaster from sewage spill, water main breaks, such as that. So we really want to thank the board and district staff and council for coming together with this proposed order that I believe satisfy Weston's obligation to meet its public duty, as well as complying with Rule 1196 in a very physical, environmentally responsible way. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we can go ahead and start deliberation. Anybody want to start? I'll go ahead. As part of the work that I did when I was on the governing board was working on the fleet rules, specifically the school bus rule and this rule. And what I am very happy to see here in the big picture is the fact that we knew at the time that there were not, the technology wasn't there for heavy duty. We knew that. However, as Ms. Roberts stated, it was a technology forcing rule. We knew that also, and that it would take several years for that to come to fruition. And a lot of the work that was done, not only by staff, but also input from academia, as well as actual users of technology that wasn't quite there, but that was going to be considered as the start. So I'm real happy to see that we're at this point, and that the rule at the time, we knew that, and we had to allow the latitude of whomever was going to be able to use the rule. And at the time, there were several municipalities that weren't quite there. They had maybe 11 or 12 or 13 vehicles, so they didn't comply. They couldn't and didn't have to comply with the rule since they were under the 15. And we also recognized the fact that they would be growing and that there would be a fleet that would be beyond that 15. And we had to figure out a way that it would be not a punishment, but an incentive to grow and to bring online all of the heavy duty vehicles that were coming throughout these years, I should say. So with that, I'm happy to see that that is happening. I understand the fact that there may have been a problem with getting that one TICR document within a timely manner. And I don't really know what the delay was. However, knowing that now that that has to be part of this program, I'm happy to see that as well. So I do see good cause, especially with the efforts that have been made and with the planning that you are looking at. I would highly recommend going into the discovery of another source of fuel like solar. I think it would behoove you to do that. And like I said before, it would eventually be cost effective. The payback period would be I would say based on your utilization, not as long as a normal estimate would be. So with that, any other comments from board members? Mr. Pearman?
I would be happy to move at the appropriate time that we find good cause for the stipulated findings and decision without any further amendments or conditions.
So moved.
Chair,
Yes.
I do suggest a couple of minor amendment here. I know Mr. Ali seconded it without giving an opportunity for me to comment, but
So moved it.
Yeah.
It wasn't seconded. So moved.
moved. Okay, sorry. One of that, I think I liked what Mr. Bryan said, the excess submission, administratively, they don't consider it. So I would like to put that word that he said administratively, because there are excess submission, but on an administrative basis, they.
What number is that, Mr.
That's on
Balaclava?
page 4, line number 2. That's both parties agree, the are in violation, administrative, the violation do not result in excess emission. Because that's, and then the other one is also, I think the language that I asked, last question I asked Mr. Cho, which was, let me get that. Page 5, 1C. If they choose to elect replace the hydrovac, and which is I think it should be a non-compliant replacement because not a compliant replacement. The TICR is only for non-diesel.
So the way it's phrased is we don't know for certain, so we left it open. So it's either a Rule 1196 compliant replacement, or as applicable, a timely TICR, right? So if it's applicable, they do have to submit the TICR timely, but otherwise, and the TICR program would require this, if there is available a rule compliant vehicle, they would have to purchase that instead of the TICR. So it's kind of an either or. Based on testimony, we don't think there is anything that's rule compliant, but hypothetically, I don't know in 2 years, maybe there's magically a electric hydrovac or something. I don't know that. So the condition is if you're going to replace it, do so either rule compliant or submit a timely TICR as applicable.
For non-compliant with 1196 though.
So if they are submitting a timely TICR, that actually is rule compliant. That's within the rule. So
Right.
that's a way to comply with the rule.
Sorry, yeah, you do submit a TICR if you want to buy not one of those alternative identified in the rule.
Yes.
You want to keep the diesel.
No,
correct?
if you want to purchase a new diesel, yes.
The new diesel, which is would be
And-
non-compliant with 1196, but
It's rule compliant as long as you submit the timely paperwork.
Correct. That's
Right.
the TIC.
So it's not like a variance from the rule. It's within the rule that if you get a TICR, you're complying with the rule.
Okay.
So I
All
don't want to put non-compliant because that suggests come back and get a variance, and that's not what this program is.
Okay,
Correct.
all right, okay. So the only, and what about the one out of the word administratively? Are you okay with that or parties?
We would accept adding administratively into the findings where you suggested.
Ms. Wang?
I think that's fine.
So that's the only change then.
Okay, I would like to add a condition that would be that you research and evaluate the feasibility of utilizing solar. That's the only thing I wanted to add to that because it's not, I'm not forcing you to, we're not trying to force you to do that, but we would like you to at least consider it.
But that's not in the rule though.
And that's not in the rule, no, but I think they have a really good opportunity here to do that. And I would like to see that at least it's done in a research and evaluation of the feasibility of that. I think it would be,
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm only concerned because it's not a part of Rule 1196.
it's, well,
And
1196 was
well,
supposed to be a
what?
technology forcing rule.
yeah, but I don't, to force a public agency to incur additional expenditures, to hire a consultant, to conduct research is not a germane even to the discussion. The gentlemen say that they're already in discussions with UC Riverside. I just don't understand why would we, first of all, we don't have the authority, but these are taxpayer dollars and we're not in a position to
And
mandate.
taxpayer dollars is what I was
Right,
thinking of.
right, but they are already engaging their governing authority. I just don't think it's necessarily germane to add it to this overall stipulated judgment.
My concern here is that they would be missing a huge opportunity in the long run to save money, and the fact that they haven't presented that to their board yet. Their board doesn't have an idea of it. I'm not trying to say they absolutely must. I'm asking them to consider
Well, I
the
do,
research.
I do believe they've been in discussion and dialogue with their executive team. I'm very confident that their board members are aware they've had to appropriate the resources to purchase the Tesla Power Pack. Hold on one second, please. But I just don't believe that we have the authority, and we ought not set a precedent with compelling, in any form or fashion, public agencies to expend tax dollars. They've complied with the provision, or have a plan to comply with the provisions that set forth in Rule 1196. This is a stipulated judgment. I'm perfectly comfortable with the amendment as proposed by Mr. Balaka-Palam, but I just can't support any additional amendments that would encourage them to consider any further expenditures. And if in fact it's so added, I'll have to vote no. Thank you.
I have to agree. I think this rule was amended as late as 2008. If the board wanted to add that language, they would have added that language, but they didn't. So I think so going beyond what the rule requires, it's problematic.
Well, I understand that, but in 2008, solar was still so out of the cost ability for not just municipalities, but also just regular residents to afford to be able to consider that at all. So since the costs have come way down and the state is actually helping, I'm just wondering if that is something that they can at least consider the feasibility of. I'm not telling them spend the dollars. I'm asking them to consider the feasibility on, and it sounded like they were already, as you said, going down that path.
Yeah, I just think that, I just believe that we should allow them to handle their business and allow them to deal with their governing authority and deal with Southern California Edison and UC Riverside, et cetera. I just don't think that and believe we have the authority. It's not an 1196. And we have a stipulated judgment. We have an agreement. I think we ought to move forward.
And I think the staff has heard this. If they go forward for another future amendment, if they think it's valid, they can incorporate it. But I don't think we need to add it to this order. That's all, because it's going beyond what the rule is requiring.
Well, like I said before, the purpose of the rule was to encourage technology advancement, and whether that was in the infrastructure or whether that was on the vehicles themselves. So, like I said before, I mean, Ms. Roberts, you want to chime in on that? And then Ms. Wang?
Sure. At this point, the district would agree with Mr. Ali and Mr. Balagopalan. The district certainly encourages the cleanest energy possible, but it does get a little bit outside of the district's purview and frankly, the district's expertise in determining what is the best way for any individual source to be able to use and get that charging infrastructure up to speed. I don't know that it is the best place in this order. Certainly, we do hear your feedback and certainly want to take that back and consider it more fully. But we wouldn't support it being added to this order. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think Mr. Fike has spoken earlier about all of the various considerations that staff member think about. As you may be aware, as a public agency, there's usually procedures involved where the staff consider items first and then go to executive staff member for consideration. And only when it's appropriate do they bring it up to the boards for decision. At this point, because I know that we have presented the proposed stipulated abatement order to the board, and this new condition have not been considered by Weston's board, and I'm not in a position to commit Weston to that new condition, and I apologize for that, just because this wasn't something that the Weston's board have considered that, and I can't agree to that at this point.
Okay, well, based on the fact that there would not be support on this. I'll go ahead and I'll withdraw it. So it'll be as, you wanted to make the,
I think. he had made
oh,
the
sorry, Mr. Orlando.
No, second, well, I so moved, so we're waiting for a second.
motion.
Who's
But you
making the
were gonna-
motion?
weren't you?
You want me to make the motion?
Well, no,
Is that Ms. Talley making the
he
motion?
presented the language and I so moved it, so you can second it.
Did you,
As a motion.
as a motion, did you submit that? I think as you said, at the appropriate time, you'll submit. Why don't I just do it and somebody can second it if you want. Okay, so in the matter of Western Municipal Water District case number 6240-1, I move that we find good cause to grant the stipulated order abatement with the changes that we discussed, basically the changing condition number 10 to the date to March 30th, 2030, I believe, and adding the word administrative to condition number, no, not condition, I think it's on page 4, line 1, or line 2, after violation, put the word administratively, and then changing the, on number 11, page 4, number of line 14, changing excess emission from 0.149 to 0.186. With those changes,
And the date.
I just mentioned the dates,
Oh.
yeah. So, and those are the changes to the stipulated order of abatement that was in the finding and decision document.
Might I just make one point? The proposed findings leave out Dr. Jerry Abraham
yes.
as being present. So we'd add that to the bottom. of the
Right.
version.
Second,
And you mentioned the March 31st, 2030
Yes,
date.
yeah.
Okay. All right. With that, let's go ahead and vote. Mr. Ali,
aye.
Mr. Balagopalan,
Yes,
Mr. Pearman,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. So,
Dr. Abraham.
and Mr.
Aye.
Dr. Abraham, I'm so sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
And you voted aye, is that correct?
Correct. Aye.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we have a unanimous decision. Thank you for the presentation that you made this morning. Again, like I said before, I think you're going down the right path and you're going to be able to expand your program quite a bit with the efforts that I see. Thank you very much to the AQMD staff for a very good explanation of 1196 to everybody, including the public, so that they can understand what the purposes were and how it's a living document that we still continue to utilize and encourage municipalities as well as small ones as well as the large ones to go down the path of cleaner fuel and cleaner vehicles. So thank you very much, AQMD staff, Ms. Roberts and Ms. Wang and your group. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
And thank you, board members. And with that, the matter is closed and we are adjourned.